Before we begin today's episode, we want to invite you to pause for a moment and consider one question. What is your mission? In the world of martial arts and self-defense, that question matters more than any technique, any belt, or any system. Because what you train and how you train directly shapes how you'll perform if violence ever finds you. In this episode, CJ and Joel explore how to think clearly about choosing a martial art, a self-defense system, and the school you train in. They talk about purpose, context, lineage, and why something is not always better than nothing when it comes to protecting yourself and the people you love. If you've ever wondered whether the training you're doing truly supports your goals, or how to evaluate where that training comes from, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it.
Well, hey, CJ. It's awesome to see you today.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I'm happy to be here.
I got some correspondence. It's actually really exciting when people tell me, like, oh, I listened to the podcast, and they share with me, something that they learned or took away. Or I also even just really like getting requests or questions. And one of the requests that came through was like, well, how do I decide if Krav Maga or XYZ martial art self-defense system is for me? And then, like, where do I go? What association, like that sort of thing. So I thought it would be an interesting topic for us to talk about today.
Yeah, I really like that. I would say, if you ask me that question, I would start with, what's your intended purpose? Because I see it in this way. There are really three classes of martial arts. There's traditional martial arts, which are cool and have their own benefits, but they're fairly limited in terms of self-defense. The contextualization is a big issue there. There's fighting, which has application in self-defense, but is typically limited in terms of the types of striking that you do, or the types of wrestling you do, or joint locks you do. And then there's a more pure system that's developed just for self-defense. And someone who's done Krav Maga for nearly 30 years, I love doing and playing with other systems, and had gone through several of those systems in my time before Krav Maga, and even during some of my early Krav Maga years. And I think that one of the things that we sometimes miss with students is they like to learn new things. And because Krav Maga is so straightforward and so simple, they sometimes are attracted to the thing that looks flashiest, right? Mm. And so the question to them is, like, what is your intended purpose? If your purpose is self-defense, then my advice is you find something that was developed for modern threats. Look for an architecture-based system that's principle-driven. And there's reasons for all that, obviously, because if you don't do that, you end up learning something rote. And when there is a change in the attack, there has to be a new defense. And so you end up with this huge catalog of defenses you can't possibly sort through under the stress of violent attack. So the other thing I say to people is this: if you do a martial art that is organized around sport, and the sport has weight classes, that's telling you something. And the implicit design of those sports is to ensure that there's a level of fairness around the participants in whatever they're doing. Let's say it's boxing or wrestling. And the reason that's implied there is a bigger, stronger, faster person has an unfair advantage. Mm. And that's true. That's true. And so the question is, does your martial art make a reasonable attempt that has some level of effectiveness around dealing with what is seen as unfair in sports, right? The last thing I think of when I think about that question really leads me to, what is it you're really trying to achieve? A lot of young men like to go to the fighting sports or sciences because they want to prove something. And I learned early on I didn't really care about proving anything. I just wanted to know how to protect myself, right? So the analogy is, if you're going to get in the octagon, but you don't know who you're going to fight or how many of them they're going to be or whether they have weapons or not, the sport kind of flies right out the window. Mm. So that might be, not a thorough answer, but it's somewhere to start.
Yeah, and I think what I hear in that is identifying the purpose, right? Is like, what is this purpose for? And you were telling me about something you do in Houston with like the 12 days of Christmas and experimenting with some different martial arts, and you were kind of talking about how some of them, judo and things like that, were designed for dismantling someone off of a horse or stopping someone from drawing their sword, or like the context of them is just so different than today's context of violence.
Yeah, it's funny. We're in the 12 days of Christmas right now. It started November 11th for my master class, and we sort of take a tour of martial arts. And my favorite thing to do is hard style karate. And if you know about Aikijutsu or Aikijutsu, that was the art of the samurai. And so judo, jiu-jitsu, karate, aikido, kendo all came from Aikijutsu. They were stripped out and made into sports. And for whatever reason, I love hard style karate. And so I was demonstrating for the master class a push to the chest, and the push is to the defender's right shoulder. And there's the hands come up, and I've seen this some of this on Instagram. Well, I don't know where it was, on social media somewhere recently. But hands come up, you grab the wrist, you roll with the energy of the attack, you grab the fingers in the pushing hand, and you finger lock the person, right? And just like our joint locks, both hands, create leverage and are helping and moving. The person who's doing that, it looks a lot like our hair grab position at the end of hair grab when someone's kind of bent over, right? And then you lift them with your left hand, you lift the chin, and then you either throw an overhand to their collarbone, or you do what looks like almost like an Aikido type clothesline movement to put them down. And the students and I work through it. It's a really fun technique. It looks super cool. It's super flashy. And, telling the truth, I just love stuff like that. And I said, okay, what could we do differently here? What would be a faster way to get to the resolution we desire, we need? And so that they think through that. And then we talk about, why is this being done this way? And I put a little stick in my belt loop, and I said, if he pushes my shoulder and my right side rolls back, then the stick in my belt loop is now exposed to the front, not the back, right? And his free hand, his left hand, can draw my sword, and then his right hand can join it, and he can utilize my sword to attack me, which achieves a couple different purposes, right? And as we started talking through this, and I said, well, why are we punching the collarbone? It's like, well, you're punching down on the collarbone. There's pain, and the thing could also break, and so most people hit the ground, which allows you to then draw your sword and attack them from above. And somebody said, what if we don't have a sword, what should we do? And I said, something totally different. So we talked through that, right? So the movement is fantastic. The defense itself is so well thought out for its context. And I love that kind of thing, right? I love Wing Chun and sticky hands and making bridges and doing pak saws and lop saws. I love some of the stuff I learned in Aikido before I realized it was not something I wanted to do as someone who practiced self-defense. Blink to Walk was another fantastic art. Bobby Tabota's sort of the fantastic guy there. So there's so many things I show the students in the 12 days of Christmas, and they love it and they pick it up. And if we define it narrowly enough, they can actually perform it. And then we ask, why don't we do this? And I think that serves, a huge purpose for the students, which is you can't jump at every flashy thing. You have to keep, your mission in mind. And what I try to tell practitioners and instructors here, outside of vertical versus horizontal development, is this: what's your mission? And by chasing things, wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, which I love them all, but are you in mission drift? And if you're in mission drift, what's happening to your mission? right? So that's how I kind of talk to people about it, and that's something we actually do in the school. The 12 Days of Christmas. It's a lot of fun.
It seems super fun. Yeah, and I mean the martial arts like enthusiast in me, since I've been doing this my whole life, is like I love to train those things too, and I love learning the different techniques, and especially when they feel very martial arty. I'm just like, oh, this is super fun to do. And I think most people who start to look into Krav Maga probably share that same purpose of like, oh, I want to defend myself, or I want to defend my family or my loved ones. And what is the most effective, most efficient thing that I can do, especially with how busy our lives are in the world is. It's like we can't train 5-6 hours a day to become a super ninja and be able to do a million different movements. So I guess then that kind of just trails into like, if we've decided on learning Krav Maga or learning a self-defense system, well then how should someone look at picking an association or picking a school?
Yeah, I'm pretty biased at this, obviously, but when you look at an association, which is where the defenses and techniques flow from into the schools, you have to ask a couple of really hard questions. The first one is, who's at the top of the association, and what is their connection with the source of the information, right? Assuming that the source of the information is legitimate, that you've researched it. For Krav Maga, we're talking about Darren Levine, who's a direct student of Amy Lichtenfeld. By the way, there are a number of direct students of Amy Lichtenfeld still in the world, and you can watch them on video and you kind of scratch your head and go, like, did you decide to go do your own thing after training with Amy? And what Darren has always been very, good about or faithful to is the principles of Krav Maga as they were taught to him by Amy, subtle adjustments when needed, but always through this powerful process of thinking and adjusting to the world and the danger around us. So, where the information is coming from is paramount. The second thing is who's delivering the information, right? Now I know where it's coming from. How connected are the people that are delivering the information from the source actually to the source, right? And then how much work have they done to truly understand the layers and the depth of the information, so that they can provide the layer of context. Like I like to say to people, I teach the what, the how, and the why. And if you can't teach the what, the how, and the why, you really don't know what you're doing. And you have to be able to do that by asking questions and answering questions as if you're like an 8-year-old kid. If you try to build a rocket to the moon because you're trying to get real technical, you kind of miss the point. You don't really know what you're talking about. And so the source of the information is important. The way the information is articulated and shared is important. The drills and the way that the association talks about knowledge transfer and neuroplasty and muscle memory or myelination, as we say, if those things aren't present, I'm a hard pass. The last thing I'd say in that regard is, and this is, I don't think this is necessarily nitpicky, but how long have the people in the organization really studied and sat with and marinated in the system? And I'm happy to say that we check all the boxes at Krav Maga Worldwide. One thing that bothers me, and this is self-serving, so take it for whatever you think it's worth, is when someone is excelling in the system and they have access to the source. In this case, Amy through Darren, and then they leave and they try and start their own thing, and they immediately cut themselves off. They immediately stop learning, and you ask yourself, like, why did you do that? You could have had your own school. There's lots of things you could have done to have been a business owner and a sharer of information and self-defense. I think that's a terrible idea. So the last thing, Joel, I know I'm talking a lot here, is what Krav Maga or martial science adjacent concepts are brought into the system. So for us, is it situational intelligence? Is it pre-attack indicators? Is it making the student aware of what laws might be applicable in their various cities and states after self-defense has been rendered. What is the post-attack behavior supposed to look like, and how do you avoid seeming like you were the attacker, and on and on and on. And handgun skills, knife skills. I don't think a lot of systems provide an integrated view of those things, and that's something that's huge for me in terms of picking and now building an association.
And I think it's fair to say, I'm biased as well, and I would just stand on the rooftops and be like, go to any Krav Maga Worldwide affiliate licensee that's near you and train. And I think we're in a growth phase right now where we have a lot of amazing, exciting updates and enhancements and things that are coming to our partners and our affiliates. And there's still lots of areas, throughout the country, throughout the world, where they might not be able to choose a Krav Maga Worldwide school because there's not one there. And part of this question that was phrased to me that had me think of this topic was just, well, what if there isn't a Krav Maga Worldwide place nearby and there's other people teaching? Is some training from someone who doesn't check all the boxes better than no training? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one I've heard before. And, my response to that is, what is your mission? What's your goal? If you're on mission, what is it? Well, I want to protect my family. Okay. Well, if you want to protect your family, you have to look at what's available and ask yourself, does this truly help you protect your family in the context of third-party protection? So, well, can I go to a jiu-jitsu school? Yeah, you could. You'll probably get good at some level of wrestling, joint locking, takedowns. So if there's one threat, maybe you can let your family escape and hope they don't have a weapon. If there's two threats, you've now tied yourself up and left your family vulnerable. So you have to go through that kind of thinking around what your mission is, right? And I think people don't do that enough. Like, if you want to fight and you came to me and said, I want to fight, what should I do? I would say, learn to wrestle or learn judo and be good at it. Learn jiu-jitsu and learn a striking art, preferably Muay Thai. Get good at those things. That's what I would tell them. But if they said, I want to protect my family, I would say, well, if you can't do something like Krav Maga, I would start with striking, and I would start with things like situational awareness, situational intelligence, and do the head work as well. Because there are martial systems that, when compared to your mission, are actually points of failure. So do the head work before you engage.
And something that I feel like I've learned and heard and experienced before, but I think has been underlined by talking with you and working with you more, is that whenever we're stuck between like one or two options, like that's like a cue for me to like pause and be like, oh, there could be 10 options, there could be 15 options. So I think when someone's like, oh, should I go to this jiu-jitsu place or this self-defense place that's not Krav Maga Worldwide, or should I not train? It's like those aren't the only options. Like, we have people all the time who are reaching out and it's like, hey, I want to really learn how to protect my family. Like, what can you do for me? We have some online training options, or we have a reservation program where people can start the process of learning how to become an instructor. And honestly, that's kind of how it started for you, right? Like, you were in a spot where you really wanted to learn how to protect yourself and your family, and then you ended up becoming an instructor because that was the best way for you to learn it, right? It's like there wasn't a school right down the road that could teach you the best stuff.
Yeah, initially there wasn't a school, and I found Krav Maga about 6 months after being robbed at gunpoint, which was an uncomfortable experience. And I just didn't want to have no answers again should something like that arise. And I looked through a ton of martial arts and martial sciences. I had done a fair amount of jiu-jitsu after UFC 1, and this was maybe not too long after that, maybe a year or two. And I'd done a lot of Kung Fu or Gung Fu or Junfan or Jeet Kune Do, whatever version of that you want to say it is. And those, I had no answers with a handgun pointed at me. So the first thing was, I suspended my disbelief. I didn't shape my mission well enough, and I was letting other people guide me, which was foolish. So that's the first piece of that. The second piece was when I found Krav Maga, I wanted to know everything there was to know about it. Like I was on fire for it. And so I went to instructor training, and then they told me, well, you have to become an instructor. I had no intention of becoming an instructor. It was purely, personal growth. And so I became a reluctant instructor based on the requirement to continue to go through the phase training. And then going through the phase training, I developed the noticing protocol, started applying that to everything I was doing, began to understand that there were layers of Krav Maga, which we talked about in the past, began to think about the drills and understand stress inoculation and situational, and on it went. And so by virtue of having to become an instructor, I was able to think deeply like I would have anyway and train very frequently, but also hone that through the process of teaching people, answering questions, and moving through the process in that particular way. I'll give you a good example. When you learn to think in Krav Maga, you learn to think, period. The hard karate style I was teaching the other night in the 12 Days of Christmas, I had seen it before. I had not trained that particular technique before, but I understood what the technique was for, where it came from, and why they were doing it that way, just by virtue of looking at the technique. Oh, they're pushing the shoulder to bring the sword forward. Why aren't they just attacking? Oh, they need to control one of the arms, and they need to change the level of the person, and they need to lift them, and they need to knock them on and on and on. And as you explain it to people, they're like, oh, I can see it, right? So I think my answer, it's a long answer, but I think my answer is encapsulated in those concepts and ideas.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think if people really truly want something, they will find a way or create a path to accomplish that. And with how our society is so much like buy it now, get it now, have it delivered right to me, it can be easy that when, there isn't the best option right in front of me, to just, drift, like you said, to something different. When, there is the possibility to create the best option, or to get connected, like you said earlier, to the source, to the people who spend their time, thinking about it. And, I know not everyone is fortunate enough to be able to do martial arts as a full-time career. But I think, like, in terms of if I'm a student looking at a school, I think that's one of the things that I would look for, if possible, is looking for people who are like instructors who are truly invested and who want to bring the best product to their students, who are investing in themselves and going out and getting that ongoing training.
Yeah, I like what you just said, but if we break it down to choosing a school, like a Krav Maga school, for instance, or a school of whatever, we talked about how the system flows through the source to the association and into the schools. But when you get to the school, you want to ask yourself, are the instructors here able to effectively transfer knowledge? So you got to kind of listen for that. You have to understand where that knowledge is coming from. But I think the biggest question for me, if I'm choosing a school, is what is the growth plan? And what I mean is, you got 3 instructors, and you got 1 black belt, and you got a blue belt and a green belt. What is the philosophy of the school, and what is the actual plan to continue to grow the knowledge base within the instructor program? And what's the plan to arm me with adjacent information or training opportunities that are all part of the self-defense continuum, or part of the martial continuum? And if they don't have good answers for that, I think it's a real problem. I'm going to give you a real concrete example. If you go into a martial arts school, they're going to tell you you're going to gain more confidence, you're going to have more clarity, you're going to be more decisive, you're going to be an awesome person. And then if you said to them how, it would be silence. You get a blank stare. It's things that we say, that we notice, primarily in some students. It's something people have been saying since the commercialization of martial arts in the 60s and 70s, and it's a lot of hogwash for a lot of schools. There's nothing intentional about it, nor do they have the skill set to understand how to deliver that. What we have done is we've taken decades of study and coaching and particularly around neuroplasty and performance coaching, and we've put it into a student development manual. And so each student that walks into a Krav Maga Worldwide school will soon be able to not only ask that question, but see it in writing, right? And I think, as far as martial arts go, there's a ton of asymmetry in that process. And asymmetry just means that one party holds all the information, right? You don't really know what you're getting into. And you see this even in your own school, Joel. I've seen it in my school. People come in, they'll try a class, they like it. But what most people do, 99% of the people in the world, is they join the school they visit last because they don't know the difference. Now they visit them all. And if that school is smart, they'll sign them up. And if that's the case, then you can see that what asymmetry of information does. Their nearest, closest, most recent experience with martial arts is this last visit they make. So if you are in a school, I mean, obviously that's information you want to know. But literally 99% of the people that take martial arts don't really know why they're taking it, how it impacts their mission. So that's a long answer, but I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that it's. I mean, for me and for you, it's been a life-changing decision, right? It's been something that's reverberated throughout everything in my life. Like I met my wife through training, and I have a business through training, and so I think it's something that's important for people to think about and to have a purpose when they come into deciding.
Yeah. If you're gonna choose a martial arts school, figure out what your mission is. Make sure that mission is satisfied by the school. Make sure that the instructor staff can deliver the information and transfer it to you. Make sure that some of the simple things are checked, like is the curriculum you want? Is the curriculum you're after at a time that you can attend? Is there an instructor growth plan? Is there a student growth plan? What's the adjacent content they can offer, either through their school or through someone else? And then one of the other questions is, like, are the facilities clean? If your facility isn't clean, it's a reflection of how you probably do everything else. So the caveat emptor, the buyer beware, has never been more relevant, continues to be relevant for people going out and making decisions about what martial arts school specifically to pursue. I would add one other thing. If you look at some of Gladwell's work, which I know is anecdotal, but I buy into it, the whole 10-year thing is real. But what would I have said about the 10-year thing if I was on my third year as a student, or as an instructor? And the answer is, the way that I would navigate that is like, no, I haven't been doing this for 10 years. Maybe that means that I'm, not quote unquote an expert, although I think if you're a black belt, you probably are. But what I would say is, I would describe to them my growth plan. I would describe to them what I did outside of Krav Maga that allows me to articulate in a way that makes sense to them. So, I worked at a consulting firm. I worked at a benchmarking firm. I worked in the securities industry. I had to go do things, communicate things, learn things that were not necessarily easy. So be prepared to answer those kind of questions if you have a school. And if you have a school and you can't, start working towards that. Make sure you give the students the most that you can give them while they're on the mats.
Yeah, thank you, CJ. I think this was even informative for me to be able to look at like some of these pieces and put them together. And I'm really excited for a lot of the opportunities that we have on the horizon for our Krav Maga Worldwide family. A lot of the things that are coming down the pike.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I don't want to cut you off. I'm so excited about it that I've been telling a few people, and they're like, "Wow, when are we going to do this?" So much stuff is coming, and it's all coming from the same place, which is that we talked about today, which is what are we doing to allow or to give access to our licensees and students across our community more information that will make them safer. I think the bottom line, Joel, is that what we do is of extraordinary importance. And if you don't know what you're doing, or you're in the martial sciences just as a profit motive, that's a huge problem, because you have a huge responsibility. And I think, as people out there that are going to go find a martial arts school, and I encourage you to do that, I want you to understand this one thing. What is your mission? And your mission should revolve around this idea. You are taking your life in your own hands. You really are. What you train will determine how you perform if violence finds you. So this is not a situation where you should go, oh, that looks cool, or I like the way, I think the guy looks cool in his karate gi, so I want one too. Those things. And so the answer I'm really aiming at for people is, yet no, something is not better than nothing. Sometimes nothing is better than something. If it doesn't fit your mission, because you're taking your life in your own hands, and we take that so seriously, and that sentiment has created a lot of other Krav Maga adjacent opportunities that are coming down the pike. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And I think, for anybody who shares this like-minded attitude, who wants to grow, who wants to protect their families, like, Krav Maga Worldwide is in a stage of growth, and we're looking for people to represent us, and who want to learn and who want to train and want to get better. So reach out if you want the authentic, best possible self-defense training that you can get, because we'd love to work with you.
Amen, man. Amen.
Awesome. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, me too, Joel. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Krav Maga Worldwide podcast. To access additional resources, read show transcripts, or to submit your questions and topic suggestions for future episodes, visit kravmaga.com/podcast.